some of you guys know we have Patrick Baines is an entrepreneur in residence. He's a young entrepreneur that people know really well. Part of when we interview and have these fireside chats, Rick, we ask people, I'm going to ask you at the very end, is who can I talk to next? Who can we bring in and sit in this chair to kind of share some pearls of wisdom? Patrick, without a hesitation, said, you got to talk to Rick. Rick was just brought on at Ben Franklin in January, but he's been sitting on the board and on the advising side for how many years?
18 years.
Yeah, so he's a long time Ben Franklin fixture. Not as forward-facing as far as we know for the past 4 years in regards to getting involved and getting around round tables that are a little bit more public. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And so when Patrick told me a little bit about Rick, what he does, not just on the investment side of Ben Franklin, but on the consulting side and on the strategy side and on getting his hands dirty. You're going to learn tonight that Rick, background COO, CTO, operator, strategist. So it's going to be a great conversation. Help me kick it off, Rick, with a little bit, not about what you've done, because we're going to dive into that, but who you are. Talk a little bit about your early seeds of entrepreneurship and what that meant to you, where you grew up, a little bit of your background.
So I grew up in North Jersey and went to University of Maryland and got a degree in electrical engineering. Everybody said that I would not be able to complete the program. I didn't have the scores, I didn't have the brains, which is true, but it was very hard. I worked super hard there and became involved in high tech purely by accident. It was somebody I just knew, a friend of a friend who called that friend, and it was just like a bizarre experience. So what really defines me is I'm a Guy Kawasaki, who's original from Apple Computer, if you know the name. He used the phrase "do well by doing good." I don't know that he invented it, but that was my first exposure to it. And
Was he the writer of Rich Dad Poor Dad as well?
I have no idea. All I know is Guy Kawasaki. So because that goes for the first startup here in Philly was Cricket Software, which did software for Apple Computers, and so that was an amazing experience. And so that is what defines me. I just love giving back. I do lunches and breakfast and coffee with people around the city for the last 30 years. I've been here since '86. That's just who I am. My goal is not to be wealthy. There's pretty much no way I'll ever be wealthy now that I work in a public company anyhow, so it's all good.
Tell us a little about the family. Parents, what did they do, or how were they born and raised?
So yeah, you know, my parents, I grew up like lower middle class in North Jersey. My father was a school teacher, my mom didn't work, we didn't have a lot of money. It was kind of town where we lived at the bottom of the hill, and then there was the top of the hill, and there was wealthy people that lived there. And those wealthy people were really not wealthy by any stretch that I'm seeing today, but to me, it was unbelievable, right? They had 2 cars. So that's, you know, I grew up that way in a sort of a teaching household, very aware of our surroundings, great friends. I still, one of my closest friends was born 2 days before me, and he's still my closest friend, so I've known him for 55 years, pretty much since the day I was born.
Fast forward a little bit and we'll do some shotgun style questions. Where do you live now? Family, kids, wife?
I live in Ballackinwood, the first town just west of the city. I like being close to the city. I'm kind of a city person. Gave up a lot. You know, it cost me money to do that, but I prefer that. I don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere. I have 2 beautiful daughters. One's a junior in college. One's a senior in high school. I'm married. You know, it's all good. Lucky every day. Every day above ground's a good day.
Raise your hand if you guys been down to Ben Franklin's new headquarters down at the Navy Yard. Joe's been down there, a couple of you guys. Tell us what's going on down there. What's a typical day look like for Rick Genzer at the Navy Yard?
Typical day.
How's the crew doing down there?
A typical day is we are doing great, right? We're easily the largest seed investor in the state. We may be the largest seed investor in the United States just because of the volume that we do. You know, what is like a pipeline for me? I have 18 qualified companies that might come into my next round. 18 companies. I started in November, not January, and I've already written 4 deals in just that period of time. Most venture capitalists might write a half a dozen a year, and we're going to do 12 in this round alone.
Wow. Well, let's stay there for a second since you brought it up. Why is that? What, is there a different thesis? Is there a different due
It's
diligence
not
that's
that
required?
it's a different thesis. We operate in a really unique place, right? You've got the friends and family round, and then you have maybe your first institutional round. There's not a lot of activity, or rather investment activity, at that seed stage. And so there's a great hole in the marketplace, and we own it. We do a very good job with it, and therefore we're a good go-to. We have a good deal. We have a great process. We're well respected. We've been doing it for 30 years. It's not like this is an accident.
Yeah, I get it. So let's real quick scan the room a bit. We have some folks in here. We have Joe Whitty from the Bunker, the veteran incubator that I was telling you about. So I'll give a little wave. We'll have some questions later. Coop here, Patrick Bain's partner from Update Central. Raise your hand if you're building a company right now so Rick knows how to cater this conversation. Okay?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if it's early stage where you've raised some money, so maybe friends and family money put towards it. Couple of you guys, friends and family. Anybody has angel backing right now? Venture? Cool. So we have a good crowd. We're going to talk a little bit about it. And a special shout out. What's your first name again, sir?
David.
Yeah, I met David today. He's actually the startup grind host out in Princeton, out of Tiger Labs. We think highly of what Tiger Labs is doing, so if you're out in Princeton, check it out. We are tweeting. Sorry about the formalities, Rick, man. We are tweeting. This stuff matters, again, because we're trying to amplify everything we do out of BD. Stop giving me that look, Scotty. Rick, kick it off with something top of mind. And then I'm going to drill down deeper on some of the topics.
Something top of
Yep,
mind.
anything you want.
Anything top of mind.
Top of mind for Rick Genzer is pretty important, so love to know.
What's top of mind? I'll go full on work. I'm stoked to be working with an entire data set that represents 17 years worth of investment activity at Ben Franklin. So it's something that really has never been done before, and so looking at this data set as a group has been really sort of fascinating to me. It's a little nerdy, a little geeky, but I happen to really like that. So that's the first thing that came to the top of my mind.
And you walked in today, you said you had a long day, you're doing wearing several different hats to make sure things push. Talk a little bit about that. What hats were you putting on?
Right.
You don't have to get specific with the type of companies you're dealing with, because I think some of them are high profile, but talk a little bit about the hats that you're wearing today.
Yeah.
So we can dig deeper and go along with some Q&A at the end that these guys
Ben
do.
Franklin is a lot like a startup. We're everybody thinks that economics is the study of money, but it's not. It's the study of scarce resources. And so when you're in a startup, that's the key. It's a study of scarce resources, and time is one of the most difficult resources to deal with. And so I wear more than one hat there. Why? Because there's nobody else I can delegate this activity to. So one of the other full-time jobs, and it's literally a full-time job, is I'm deploying an automation system that helps us manage our companies and deal with deal flow. It's something that's really never been done at Ben before. That's not calling Ben a name. It's just never gotten done before. And now I'm the one that's dealing with it. Lucky me.
Wait, you're talking about putting in a new process to allow more companies to have
I'm
an
not talking about
opportunity.
putting in a new process. I'm talking about moving us out of stone tablet and blood ink to an IT system that actually like it's Salesforce. You're deploying Salesforce.
No kidding.
Yeah. So in December, I knew almost nothing about Salesforce, and now I'm configuring the phases of.
So help us out with some numbers here. How many startup companies do you think you have in your Salesforce platform right now, and how deep is the notes on each of these startups?
I can tell you that right now. I have 200 active portfolio companies in the Salesforce system that came from that giant database that I just described to you. So the top of the funnel is everybody who's ever touched, and then it gets curated and working on down. So I've been through that list of companies. I don't know whether you guys have ever dealt with this, but you start with a spreadsheet, right? And you've got a bunch of data. You're at the top of the funnel, you're squirreling away, and then you run through it once. You're like, oh, I don't have the right data. I don't have the right parameters for that. So then you go and you scrub it again. You scrub it again. You scrub it again. Dedupe it, right? Scrub it. And then you start, only until it gets clean does that pie chart look normal, right? The pie, why are these slices so weird? Because the data's not good. When you clean the data. So here I am an investment director, but that's another hat that I'm wearing. These two other hats is one is being this data analyst, two being this automation guru, and three is great. My third-time job is investment director, which is why I was hired.
Wow, so Rick Genzer is scrubbing spreadsheets and making them functional. It's funny, we have Ryan here, who's a social entrepreneur known worldwide. You'll talk with him later on. They're helping us think through intelligently. How do you outsource teams to work intelligently around time-intensive tasks? Looking at the process and making it a little bit more efficient. So he's one of our gurus here.
So there's a phrase for that. anything you can draw a box around, you can get somebody else to do. And so everybody thinks, well, yeah, that doesn't seem so hard. Well, it turns out drawing a box around something is really hard to do. You have to really articulate what it is that you need. But if you can do that, if you challenge yourself to say, I really can draw a box around this, then it is something that you can outsource. The issue is that the edges tend to be really fuzzy and not precise enough, and as a result, you send it off to some other facility, to some other person, you're just delegating it, and what you get back is junk, and oftentimes, you're saying, you didn't do a good job, you know, blah, 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 and that's not it, man. You know, you didn't define what you're expecting. You didn't give them the rubric, right? You didn't tell them how to be successful. You didn't draw a good box around what you're trying to do.
Gosh, I want to stay there. I'm not going off my notes, Rick, and I think this whole interview is going to be not about my
What,
notes.
I'm going to go off the rails? How unusual.
So I want to stay there. Don't let me forget to go back, because I think that adds clarity to messaging when startups are trying to get their pitch out there and what that looks
Messaging.
like. But don't go there yet, because I want you to go there next. 200 startups in Ben Franklin's list that you're scrubbing right now. Help me out with the segmentation. What does that list look like? Industry, stage, types?
So Ben Franklin is, we have three verticals that we deal with: life sciences, physical sciences, and IT. And the breakdown really is, IT is clearly IT, life sciences is almost always life sciences, and then everything else is physical sciences, which is a weird thing to do. We're heavy in life sciences and IT. That's no surprise. It's, you know, aren't that many manufacturing companies around here, or non-IT, non-life sciences types. Digital health is really big. I don't really have numbers off the top of my head in terms of saying how that breaks down.
Ballpark.
But it's a third. I'm sorry. It's like more like 40-40-20 is probably more accurate. Is probably what it is.
Got it. Life science first?
Yeah, well, like I said, no, you see, life sciences, it's interesting, that compound wave has sort of sailed in Philly. There was a while where we were doing a lot of, I call it compound, you know, I've got a new drug, right? And while that's still going on, it's very difficult to do that as a seed investor, because they don't need 50,000, 100,000, or 200,000. They need $1 million, $2 million, 10 million, and they don't have anything. Could you imagine asking somebody for 10 million bucks and you don't even have any idea what the product is? But yet, if you have a compound with that kind of promise, they do get that kind of money. That's not what Ben Franklin does. So we do more in the digital health side.
Yeah, let's go back to messaging real quick. I think this will be helpful. For some of you guys that are members here at BD, we do these BDVCs where we get guys like Rick around the table. It's a warm touch point, allows them not to be penalized for anything they say or do
Right.
in front of Rick.
It saves them.
At a safe zone, but it allows them to grab pearls of wisdom or data points from you guys that how to position themselves. Help the crowd out, help the camera out in regards to messaging, clarity, you get in front, the warm introduction's been made. Next step, you set up that formal interview or the formal pitch. What does that need to look like? What's clarity look like in your eyes?
So two pieces of advice in this regard. The first one is get to the point. You know, don't meander. Practice in front of a mirror. Most people think they're being concise, and they really, really are not. You know, it's amazing how unfocused somebody can be, right? So if you say to somebody, I've been working on this thing for a year, and then you say, well, what is it? And then 5 minutes later, you're still not sure, well then, that doesn't say anything, right? You're working on this for a year, and yet after a year, you still can't articulate it in 2 sentences. That's a problem. So, you know, what is it? There was an old, back in the letter writing days, where a letter from, I think it was from a president. I don't remember which president. I'm sorry this letter was so long, I didn't have enough time. Right? It's much easier to just vomit information. It's much easier to give 20 points, 30 points, just bang, 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 bang. It's much more difficult to say only 3 things. And so people think that, oh, it's the giant list that makes you seem really intelligent. Not in my book. What makes you seem intelligent is being able to be concise, to the point, and stop. The second thing I want to say about messaging is stories are really important. You know, you started by asking me a little bit about my story. I'm not sure I did a good job sort of telling my story because I wasn't expecting it. But the fact is that if you tell the story, you know, why are you doing this? Not just what are you doing, but why are you doing it? What do you bring to the table? What's your personal story? That really resonates well. So notice I didn't give you the anatomy of a good pitch, because there is no such thing as anatomy of a good pitch. It's really about being able to be concise and really, really get to the point, the essence of what you're trying to do, and then bring some of you, bring some of your personality to it.
Paint the picture, get the narrative the right way. So we have some pretty interesting entrepreneurs in the room now. What is, talk a little bit about the follow-up, Rick, in regards to you sit down, you feel like you have a pretty good back and forth. Is it on the entrepreneur, the startup founder to reach out to you guys and show you next steps? Or is it literally looking at what the expectations were in the meeting and looking at whose job it is to reach out next? Talk about the mechanics a little bit of the next steps.
I think I'm gonna morph your question a little bit and talk about successful interactions and when you're on the asking side, how do you have successful interactions? So I do two things that I think are useful, that may be useful for you. So let's say we're in a meeting, doesn't matter what the meeting is. The first thing that I always do is I make sure that at the beginning of the meeting that we agree on what the goal is of the meeting. Now, you know, a good newspaper article, a good article of any type, tell me what I'm going to say it, and tell me what I already said. So there's no difference for meetings. So let's establish the goal together. We have our conversation, you're taking notes. At the end of every meeting, if you have it with me, I'm going to tell you, these are the action items that I took from this conversation. Well, I expect the same of you. So I cannot tell you how many meetings I've had with somebody who's looking for information from me and not taking notes. I'm like, you're either really smart or really dumb. Most people are not that really smart. They're not going to remember what they wanted to take away. Taking notes it's not a sign of weakness. So at the end of the meeting, I'm saying these are the three things that I'm promising to do. Now, I'm not going to ask you, well, what did you promise to do? But that's what I'm looking for. Because then, if 2 days later, I get the three things that I asked from you, you've now come, boop, in my book. It's great. That's fantastic. Not hard to do, but it's a discipline that a lot of people don't have. Start a meeting with a goal, end the meeting with, this is what I heard, this is what I owe you, and then do it.
Simple, love it. Help us out here with some real stories without going detailed into names and the type of companies. Some of the great things you've seen, not in the January to now role, in those 15 to 18 years that you put in. What are some of the things that stand out that, you know what, I knew that company was going to have success because of X, Y, Z? Or on the flip side, unfortunately, that company jammed themselves up because of X, Y, Z. Share some real stories that these guys can get a download on.
So when I was a management consultant for 17 years before I joined Ben Franklin, so I had a chance to see a tremendous number of companies. And I'll tell you an example of a tremendous opportunity, and then that tremendous opportunity gone awry, because I think there's some nuggets here. So you're together in a meeting, and everybody's talking about going into a very important venture capital meeting. So I don't know what you guys are talking about, getting institutional money your first time. It's a pretty heady experience, right? You've been raising money in the 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, and now you're going to a meeting and you're going to ask somebody for 2.5. And so you have a strategy session, as you should, to say, hey, these are the things we want to talk about. You do some reconnaissance on who you're going to meet with. You get to know who they are, and you agree on a strategy. And you get together and you really talk this thing out, and you're going to disagree, right? You're going to have arguments, right? 51% agreement, 100% consensus, right? So you do this, and you get there, and you have a game plan. You go in there, and what happens? The first question gets thrown out there. One of two things I've seen happen. I cannot tell you how many times. The question comes that you prepared for, and you know exactly what's going on, and maybe they nail it, or somebody in the room goes off the rails and starts answering the question exactly different than what you expected. Or the other fun one is you get a question that you did not prepare for, that it was a total curveball question, you totally didn't know what to do, and you're making it up on the fly.
What was that entrepreneur's name? Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right?
Everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face.
Ain't that the truth?
So I have a story to tell about my years doing business development, if I may.
Please.
I'll tell a story about, I was doing IntelliHealth was one of our companies back in the dot-com boom days, and I was both chief technology officer and the head of business development. Crazy combination, I know. We're doing a West Coast spin going and see all the big companies at the time. Netscape was a big one. And so we were visiting these companies, and every meeting was the same. I did it the same way, right? Somebody would go first, and they would spend 5 minutes sort of laying out where their head is at, right? Because you're doing biz dev, right? And then you do 5 minutes of like where your head is at, or 10 minutes, and then you have a conversation, right? And then towards the end, I would be like, well, it seems like we have 3 options. And I would always go to the whiteboard. I'm a whiteboard guy. Put down 3 options: 1, 2, 3, bing, bing, bing. And me and my colleague, who I worked with, we did this 3 times a day for almost an entire week. And so we're on the, oh, by the way, so, you know, and I would say, well, what do you guys think? And they would choose one, and then after the meeting, we'd always, by the way, time out. A good thing to always do at the end of every meeting when you're with your colleague or colleagues is, what did we do well? What would we do different? What did I do well?
Wait, after the meeting, you're saying?
After the meeting, in closed doors, you're saying to your colleague,
Lessons learned.
what did I do well? What would you do differently? And then you do the same. You just get into that as a discipline. So we do this after every meeting, or at the end of the day over beers, of course.
Love it.
We're on the plane ride home, and the guy says to me, he says, Rick, I don't understand something. He goes, every meeting was the same. You would do your spiel, and we'd have this conversation for 20, 25 minutes, and then you'd go to the freaking board, and you'd put down 3 options. Rarely are there the same 3 options, right? Somebody would choose one, and we would come back after the meeting and be like, that was a good meeting. I think we got what we wanted. Go, but you gave them 3 options every time. And I said, what made you think they were 3 good options? And then he started thinking about it. He goes, yeah. So the point is that the person with the plan wins. So during the meeting, I'm thinking through what might the options be, and what might our best option be, and what might be a little less inferior options, right? So there's almost always one option that I know is probably going to resonate, another option that's not as good but still okay, and then a throwaway option that I'm almost guaranteed not to get somebody to choose. So now it's down to 2. If they do anything like you guys...
Is there a name for that, Rick?
I have no idea.
Come on with a name for that.
I have no idea.
Genzer
But this
method.
guy was flabbergasted.
It's
Because
called a forced choice.
There you
It's
go.
common in stage magic.
Yes.
There we go.
Stage magic?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my God! Don't.
You got magical skills.
I am no mad. I am no
Go ahead.
That's my story.
Awesome story. You already have me on tilt here. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs in here, Rick, that care about professional development as well, how they grow. You see they're putting hours in. Talk of 2 things. Working smart versus working hard. What does that mean? Because I know you're known for putting in those 70-hour work weeks. Talk a little bit about the working hard, working smart thing, but also talk about professional development even as a... Bruce, what are you? 28?
Huh.
25.
I don't know how to answer that.
I mean, it's a young entrepreneur. A young 25 to 32-year-old entrepreneur.
So it's the 5th anniversary of your 28th birthday. Yes.
What does an entrepreneur like Bruce?
You like that, do you?
What does an entrepreneur like Bruce do to continue to craft his game, build on it?
Okay, so I have
to allow
a few
him to be-
things to say here. A
A
few
few
things to say. So about working hard and working smart, I've done both, and I don't think, I don't love the phrase, don't work hard, work smart.
Mm.
You really have to work hard and smart. I'm sorry.
Love it.
It's just one of those things. There just nothing takes the place of just the grind of the hours you have to put in. My quota is I'm going to write 100 emails this week. That's not a working hard, working smart thing. That's I got to write 100 emails. I'm going to write 100 emails, right?
Execute.
So there's that, and I can tell you the story about writing software for 24 hours straight, like continuously, in an office with one desk. The QA guy and the software engineer, each one would take turns sleeping under the desk. I kid you
What,
not.
like 8 hours, 8 hours?
8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours.
Yeah.
This is what it was like in the early 80s with startup culture. Bill Gates walking through our office trying to buy us, right? So this is the time where we're working
Yeah.
7 days a week, almost all of our meals in the offices. So You got to work smart, that's true, but nothing takes the place of working hard. Professional development. One of the things that's really important to me is giving back. It's just like it is who I am. I've booked, I cannot tell you how many hours of my life just spending time working with entrepreneurs, helping people out. My neighbors kid me all the time. They go, ask Rick anything, he'll say yes. I'm an idiot, right? I just say yes to everything. But
is that servant leadership, or is that just something that was ingrained with you to your parents or something?
Well, my sister actually was the person that enlightened me to this idea of community service. She's an amazing, Debbie Genzer is my sister, and she started a community-based learning back at Emory University. It was in Time Magazine for this thing. So she was one of the first people to do that. If you could Google her, I suspect it exists. So she really socialized me to this idea, but I promised I would bring it to professional development. So right now I carry 6 volunteer jobs that I do, boards and all kinds of volunteer things, and just being outside of what you're currently doing, outside your echo chamber.
Wait, you said 6.
I have 6 different volunteers.
As you're the director of investments for Ben Franklin.
And I have 2 full-time jobs at Ben, and
Go ahead, let me interrupt, go ahead. It's impressive.
It's not impressive, it's just that there's important work that needs to get done. And it's not just your startup that's important. And anybody that tells you that they do something pure altruism is lying. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you a story about that in a moment. So it feels good to give back, and it's okay to say that. It's as long as it's not the main reason why you're doing it, right? So there's a lot of important work to be done. Once a month I volunteer at JRA, and I get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I unpack boxes and move all this heavy stuff around, and I do that, for 4 hours on a Saturday morning, on a Sunday morning. I love it. It makes me feel great. I get a good workout out of it. I press the flesh. I meet some people. But I'm bringing this to professional development. Well, number one, you meet people in those situations that you wouldn't meet in your little echo chamber. Number two, you get used to being in new environments that you haven't been in before. It's just about learning how to meet people and connect and be able to do that. That's super duper important. And then lastly, you just might learn something. And you just might learn something that brings you forward. Once a week, I would go into Delaware County Prison, and I would spend 2 hours one-on-one with a prisoner. And then another time, once every couple of weeks, I would do it with that same one prisoner and then a group, and we'd do a group session. I did this for 10 years. It was a fantastic experience. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Now, number one, it was a big time commitment, right? But it was some of the most gratifying time I've ever spent. I learned so much about decision making myself. What is the phrase? When one teaches, two learn. Is that? I think that's the phrase. There's something about doing that. So yeah, that was community service. But I am a much better person. Excuse me. From that experience. And I would never have had an experience like that hadn't I chose to go out and do that. So I'm not giving you professional development advice like learn how to do business cards and you can read those books.
That's right.
This is about...
Stay there for a second, man. You committed 10 years of your life to doing something so admirable. Talk about some of the data points of some of these prisoners who are in there for making bad decisions, obviously. What were some of the takeaways that you were able to say, that got through?
Oh my God, that is a good question. I like this one.
I've never been in prison.
So my favorite... I think the best takeaway from it is that decision making can be turned into an objective matrix. And if anybody afterwards want me to show you how that works, but picture rows in a spreadsheet, and the rows are the ideation, the results of your brainstorming, and then the columns are the criteria that you're using to rate each one of them. What was fascinating to me, I learned two great things here. The first one is that the reason why many people are in prison is because they've generally not been around good decision makers. And that we don't realize the people in this room, you're blessed. Because chances are you've been around decent decision makers, and that's why you're here, not in prison. So consider yourself that. And don't forget that making decisions is actually what makes you who you are.
So are you saying, are you a product of your environment? Do you believe in that theory?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'll go on a tangent in that in a moment, but I want to finish the
Yep,
two
sorry.
things I said, which was, it was that, and then what's surprising about a lot of people, even people that make decent decisions, is they look at the evidence and they do the opposite. And that was one of my favorite clients in prison, was a guy who was top of the world, had a construction company. He was basically taking washing machines and equipment and hiding them after they were delivered, and then claiming that they were stolen, and then he could get the insurance, and he's in jail. What was really interesting about it is that when we went through this process where we decided what was the best decision, I would say, okay, Joe, I don't remember his name, which one would you choose? And he would choose like this one. I was like, dude, you just went through this whole thing. They were your criteria. You rated option number 3 the best one. Why 8? He goes, I just think so.
Wow.
So don't do that, right? Is all I'm saying. That you're going to get some evidence, you're going to see some data. Make sure that you at least appreciate the data. I do happen to believe, Malcolm Gladwell wrote Blink, I believe. I do believe that sometimes your first inclination is the best one, but if you gather data, do it, right? If it's not worth measuring, it's not worth doing. So, measure it, and then, use the measurements and inform on your decision.
Gosh, man, I'm telling you, I'm throwing this iPad away. This is
Okay.
a good conversation. Product of your environment. So we talked to some inner city
right.
kids, and Coded by Kids is a great foundation in the city that's helping kids use coding and technology to create different aspirations. BD has something in the works around big dreams, BD, big dreams, around entrepreneurship and what that looks like. Talk about product of your environment, and what are some of the mechanics that maybe can go against the data that says it's against you, the people in your ear are against you, the folks that you're hanging out with are against you. What is the one thing you can control in a situation like that kids can maybe latch onto and folks can be of assistance?
So I'm gonna use one example of the power of mind, and I'm gonna go back to prison for just a moment. But what I would do is I would have everybody raise their hand who'd been shot. And so, I'm not kidding, half the people would raise their hand. How many people have been stabbed? And then you get at least 80 or 90%. And then how many people broke an arm or a leg? And then by then you have everybody up. And I said, okay, now, and I'm gonna have you guys do this.
Broke somebody else's arm or leg?
Right? And then I would say, okay, close your eyes, and now try to remember what that pain felt like. Can't do it. That is an example of how powerful your mind is. You experienced that pain, I promise you that you did, and you remember a lot of things about it, but you do not remember how much it hurt. And the reason why is that your mind is capable of doing that. And so I would say to them, well, now think about anger. You think that anger takes over you. You think that you don't have a choice to be angry, but in fact you do. So I'm bringing this up for getting around your environment. See, you can power through that. You can persevere if you decide that that's what you want to do. So I believe that everybody has that potential. And I'm not giving you this happy stuff. I mean that you have to work hard and work smart, but you also have to put your mind to it and believe that in fact you can do that. Right? So some people in this room have gotten over sicknesses. Well, the way that happens is it's not an accident. Right? You do it because you decide that that's what you're going to do. And that's going to be the difference between the people who persevere and the people who don't. It's the people who've decided that they're not going to let whatever negatives that are hitting them.
Talk about comfort zone a little bit. Around, can you stretch your comfort zone? Should you step out of comfort zones occasionally? What does that look like? 'Cause that ties to your theory around perseverance. Is there a way to get more resilience around as a startup entrepreneur to deal with the ebbs and flows?
So there's a phrase, something like, behind every successful person there's a string of failures. I don't know anybody who's truly successful that didn't totally flame out. An example, I personally lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on the only deal I went after for the money, which made me realize that I'm destined to never, ever make a lot of money, because when I go after the money, see, that's what happened. And when this experience came up, my father-in-law talked to me we were having a conversation. He's quite a bit older, obviously.
You didn't lose his money, did you?
No, I'm not an idiot. And he said, Rick, how are you ever gonna get another job? You had this horrible experience in companies in Chapter 11 and, flamed out. And I go, I don't think you understand, right? In your era, that is like bad juju and you'd never recover from it, perhaps. Where I come from, that shows that I now have a really good 2x4 scar, where you don't see the 2x4 and you get it across the forehead. So I'm not gonna make that mistake again, right? So perseverance is the failures are really the bricks in a foundation towards the launch pad of the next thing. You can't look at it like, oh, woe is me, I really failed, I can't believe I screwed that up. You have to look at, okay, well, what can I learn from that? And then I'll take that to launch forward.
Awesome.
It's a pretty trite example, though.
No, I like it. It's, Startup Grind has over 100 cities now, I believe, globally. And so you're hearing these type of stories.
200.
Over 200?
Check it out.
You're hearing these stories.
Doubling right before us.
Just like that. It's on demand. You're hearing these stories all the time, and it's inspiring for entrepreneurs to hear it. Talk about the reality. There's sexy stuff around startup entrepreneurship. Sometimes, unfortunately, companies, like co-working space like ourselves, we sell it. But we really try to go down into the brass tacks of ebbs and flows and what it takes to be a successful startup founder. What does that look like in your eyes? Paint the picture a little bit less flowery. Flower, is that a word, flowery?
I have no idea. It's a good one, though. What does it look like? Are you asking the how-to? Like, I want to make sure that I'm servicing you to what you want. I mean, I think that, I mentioned it earlier, but it bears repeating. Good entrepreneurs are good storytellers. They need to be able to tell the story. Because chances are you're smoke and mirrors to begin with, so you're going to have to tell a good story, and then appreciate the fact that what you're trying to do is build on that story. So I use the bricks in the foundation. So one story builds the next story. So entrepreneurs ask me all the time, right, should I do this pilot project or not? And I go, well, if you can do it quickly, it becomes the next story. So yeah, the answer is do it, because that, if nothing else, gives you the next story to tell. If you're just first starting out, there's nothing interesting to talk about.
So we have some entrepreneurs and startups in here that are on the video that are thinking through utilizing mentors. What are some strategies some of the startup entrepreneurs can use to get the most out of a mentor 60-minute office hour that's already curated?
I just love this. So, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't ask, you don't get. And that's true not only securing a mentor, but then when you're with your mentor, if you don't ask, you don't get. You ask a question, what color is the sky, and this person starts talking about this, you're like, no, hold on, I want to know what color is the sky, right? You don't ask, you don't get, meaning you have to be clear about what you're asking for and make sure that you're determined to get that. The other thing is, I use a phrase, how can I help you help me, right? So you need to help them, your mentor, help you. By being crisp, right? Set the goal of the meeting. What is our goal? What am I hoping to gain? I do office hours once a month at Corso Center at University of the Arts. I volunteer 2 hours a month there at 4 30-minute sessions, and I start off.
Is that enough time? You think 30 minutes is enough time?
No, it's not enough, but I mean, it is what it is. So I start off, what's your goal in meeting with me? What's your goal in meeting with me? And oftentimes people can't answer that question, and I wait. I said, well, let's figure that out then. That's the best thing I can do for you right now, is to figure out what that goal is. So when it comes to the mentor, start with the end in mind. Start with, well, what are you hoping to gain from this one interaction? If you could have anything, what would it be? That way you're almost sure to get what you want. Otherwise, you walk in there just hoping that wisdom will be imparted upon you. I promise you that will not happen.
We are tweeting people, so make sure you get these one-liners out there. They're really strong. Tee up some questions, guys, because we're going to go to you guys in about 4 or 5 minutes. Put your consultant hat on for a little bit. Obviously, I think you wear that as well with the strategy. What are some things that you're okay with startup entrepreneurs outsourcing, and some things that you're not okay with them outsourcing? I know the answer is probably it depends, but help me out with some stories.
I can tell you for sure that you don't outsource your message, any of that kind of work. I don't think you should ever outsource it. Only you and, your few partners sitting in a room arguing about what that should be is the only, I've never seen a message happen from somebody else. I mean, I hear these big companies spending $10 million
On a
some
professional pitcher.
That's insane. I just can't even imagine that. But, back to the anything you can draw a box around, you can get somebody else to do. That's, super, super appropriate. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of offshore development. I know that sometimes it's the only way it can get done, but I can tell you that while I was a consultant, I probably did 30 onshoring efforts over those years. Now, maybe for the early prototype when you only have 67 cents to do it, that makes sense, but it's pretty hard to get technology built when it's 100% outsourced, and the reason for that is you tend not to be crisp. And so if you can't really draw a box around something that you're not crisp about, and so therefore you're not necessarily going to get what you expect. So even though the hourly wage is less than you might spend here, there's nothing that takes the place of a developer arguing with you about how this might or might not work. Or once you start seeing that screen, skeleton that you threw together start coming to life, it looks like ass. And now it's a 2-day turnaround before you can get somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
I like to be ideating with messaging people, marketing people, sales people, and technical people all in the same room, arguing about what it should be, so that we each bring our own biases to the table.
Yeah, it makes sense. We have some hybrid folks in here from even Speed of Function that they'll do stuff onshore and offshore, and it works really well because you still huddle with the group that's in your city and doing the right thing, yet get the talent and the economies kick in to get the right type of economics to work. Guys, one thing Rick said to me earlier in the back was, hey, open it up to the crowd. I'll take, usually we do 5 questions. Open it up to the crowd because he really wants to hear what's top of mind for you guys to make sure this is meaningful. I am going to kick it off with a couple quick rapid fire questions for you. So top of mind. You mentioned earlier about working hard. Were you the entrepreneur that stayed up late or woke up early?
Both. Sorry. I am an early riser.
Okay.
And nowadays I do not do late nights anymore.
Gotcha.
You can talk to me at 6:30 pretty easily.
Yeah, that's no doubt. What was your last all-nighter that you pulled, Rick?
You know what? I'll tell you interesting. I was at, the tortoise and hare. I was so the tortoise my whole life. So I've done one all-nighter in my entire life. I'm sorry. There may be people who will swear by the fact that you can sprint. I don't believe in that. So one all-nighter total, even through all these startups, and I'm talking about 70, 80, 90-hour weeks.
Yep.
But no all-nighters.
Why? Too many issues and errors and bad judgment?
Well, I can also tell you that I truly believe that about 50, 55 hours is the max on an ongoing basis of your productivity. That your productivity starts to decrease significantly once you start getting above 55 hours a week. So you're kidding yourself into thinking that I'm going to work, and you want this of your employees and stuff like that. No, that's BS.
Easy. I have some employees in there that put in 60.
You have to be my. And by the way, if it's not worth measuring, it's not worth doing.
Labor's fun.
Delete that part. Yeah.
I'll bet you right now, if any of you do a measurable job like cold calling or writing code or anything like that, plot. I dare you. Plot your productivity against the number of hours you're doing in a week, and I'll bet you that it bears out.
Wow.
Let the data talk for itself. I bet you it starts at about 55 hours, your productivity starts going down. By the time you get to 60, those 2 extra hours you worked in the day, the next day you're redoing it. You didn't get those 2 hours, it cost you 2 hours. So think about that. Like, if you're really, really tired, you can do the menial stuff when you're exhausted, no problem, but don't do any intellectual work.
I'm going away from rapid fire for a minute. What you have a?
Because that wasn't a rapid fire answer. I know.
That's all right.
I get it. It was
Hypothetically, you have a son coming out of college, 23, smart, wants to take on the world. What is some of the advice you're giving him before he launches into one of the 3 ideas he has in his head?
Can I have a daughter? Is that all right?
I'm sorry, yeah, or daughter, yeah.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you don't want a person.
I got 4 brothers, and so
I
it's
get it.
something. I got 3 boys at home too.
All good. So I think it's being able to transcend all the no's you're gonna get. It's not personal, you know? When somebody says no, they said no, but they're not saying no, you're an asshole. They're just saying no.
Not now, maybe.
Not now. Well, it could even be no, but you can't say, well, oh, that means that I am a failure, or that means that. They didn't say that. They just simply said no. And so what I'm seeing in a younger generation is that no is devastating. You know? Right? I mean, it was just a no. I mean, just a no. And so don't be afraid of, you know, I can't, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the phrase I use for this, but this idea of no meaning it's just.
Next opportunity.
Oh, there you go. No means next opportunity. Fine, great.
We had Brock Leather up here last month, and he said, I asked him, what's some of the worst advice you've ever received? He goes, don't take no for an answer. The worst advice he ever heard, do not take no for an answer. Sometimes a no is okay.
No also means, well, okay, I figured out what not to do.
Yeah.
I'll just not do that again, right?
So we're gonna get to questions. Help me think through this, Rick. Does Rick Genzer hate losing or love winning more? Which one? Hate losing or love winning?
Oh, right. I hate losing, and I hate losing for the following things. So I used to be much more competitive than I am now. Now, like I was playing ping pong last night with a neighbor, and I won. I've been winning a lot of the games. We've been getting better together, and I've been throwing a couple of the games. Hopefully, he never sees this. I've been throwing games because I don't really care that I'm winning. I only care that I'm playing well. If I'm playing well, I'm fine. If I play well and somebody else is playing better, I can live with that now. I wish I knew this when I was 20, so I used to want to only win. Now, I just want to do well. If I feel like I've performed well in this type of a setting, that makes me feel good. I don't need accolades. I don't need to feel like I've won. But that was a long time getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. What's on your nightstand or podcast? What do you listen to these days? Or reading?
So I'm a voracious reader of media. So I don't read a lot of books anymore. I read articles about everything. I'm constantly on my iPad. I also am a maker, so I spend a good amount of time sometimes, watching a YouTube video, which then takes me right into a shop to go do something. So that's it. But from reading recommendations, I think Malcolm Gladwell's a genius. Everything I've ever read from this guy has been profound.
Awesome, I love it. Guys, we're gonna take some questions from the crowd. Hands up, and we'll go, maybe before you even ask your question, who you are, what you're working on, and then answer your question. Whit, we'll kick it off to you.
Whitney Craig, web developer, specifically around UArts actually, I'm a graduate, and I've never gotten in touch with him. I briefly talked there, but I've never gone back to them. I know about the Corso Center. What is the Corso Center like? What
The Corso Center is a entrepreneurial resource that's free to pretty much everybody, not just UArts. Their flagship program is this open office hours, which you can just find on the Corso.
And a good digital platform for resources there as well.
Yeah, and then they give out pretty much grants to or to alum for various business plan competitions. It's really a pretty vibrant place. Neil Kleinman runs it. He's a good friend. I've known him for 15 years.
So just stop in, kind of thing, just make that.
Well, just look at Corso Center and find out the contacts, and if you want, just find me and I'll connect you.
Awesome.
My name is Etwan. I don't have a startup yet. I'm a college student. So I just have a general question about your overall investment thesis. So Malcolm Gladwell talked about thin slicing in Blink, where people make very rapid decision based on a limited amount of information, like instantly. So did that ever came in your investment process at all, like over the past few years? And
So
how
I'm
did that-
not a big gut guy. If you haven't noticed that, I'm not one of these plodding, methodical nerds either. I'm just saying that I'm neither, right? I'm not one of these, rapid fire, just get one slice of information and go with it, or just sort of this plodding away. What is it? Paralysis of analysis. So that is not an investment thesis of mine. I'm also not particularly good, and I don't have a lot of sponsorship and ad-based models. I just find that they're more like rolling the dice. When something becomes viral, when it catches on. It's never been particularly a forte of mine. I like things that are a little bit more methodical, that can be proven, that you can model out. So one of my best pieces of advice about how to do this is being able to create a Proforma of your business. People have the cash flow statements and profit loss and balance sheets and this whole thing, and it shows everything. And you know what? That's fine. On a single page spreadsheet, show me what are your KPIs, what are the key measures that your business runs. So those are the things that drive your business. What's your top line, what's your bottom line, and then show that to me and explain to me how that works. If you can do that, I will invest. Well, as long as that shows that it's a good business. Right? You shouldn't look at it as a shit business.
No, it's inside out.
But I have asked, I cannot tell you how many people to provide me an analysis like that. The top 10%, they can do it, they're cranking. The other 90% who can't do it, hey, if you can't do it, you expect me to do that?
What university?
Swarthmore College.
Excellent.
Good job.
Ben?
In fact, I just saw your resume.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Ben Bowman, leadership management consultant by day, tech startup early stage by night, weekend, that other 15 hours, I guess. Let's pretend it stops at 55. Question for you as it relates to, you talked about outsourcing some things earlier. I'm at a tipping point right now where I've been looking for a technical co-founder. I'm a non-tech guy. And so I'm at the point right now, do I continue trying to find that tech co-founder, or do I look to outsource the initial development as I bring something to market? From an outside investment, from your perspective of just working with so many different companies, do you have reservations investing in a tech company founded by a non-tech guy? And if so, what advice would you give for somebody like me?
That's a good question. So I'm gonna morph it just a smidge. So I use a phrase called we all know the MVP, right? The minimum viable product. So I call it the MMVP, right? The minimal, right? So if you can focus on that, if you can show the screens, if you can articulate what that is and be able to say what your goal is that thing will be able to do, then you probably can outsource it. But if you're still ideating about it, like if there's a piece of the technology that you're just not even sure is possible, then you need to partner. So that's really the differentiator. And you explained your business just very briefly to me, and it felt very straightforward. And I don't mean that in a belittling way. But given that, then you probably could outsource it. But the onus is on you to make sure that you articulate. And by the way, the best advice here is to start with requirements, not design. Most people think they need to be designers.
Like functionality, utility? No.
What I'm saying is, these are the requirements of this widget. It needs to load it needs to be this fast. It needs to support this many people. It needs to be flexible in these areas. Those are requirements. They're not designs. Most people start with the design. That's the tail wagging the dog.
Can I ask a follow-up? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I'm cheating. So let's say I do exactly that, and I'm able to outsource and bring the MMVP. And then I decide in order to scale, I need to seek outside investment. From your experience, would there be reservations investing into a non-tech co-founder that has the ability to have something that, proof of concept at this point?
It'll depend upon the pheromone,
Okay.
right? In other words, if that widget you're trying to build or think you want to build that you think you might be able to do, if it's particularly alluring, then absolutely, and that's what Ben's here for. In fact, we have 2 loan programs. I'm not selling, but we have 2 loan programs. The first one is our accelerator program. It's a limited amount of money that's fairly smooth and relatively easy to get.
Typical drops, how much?
It's not typical. It's $50,000 with a 50% match. So for $75,000 total program, you should be able to be on your way. Based on what you told me, absolutely. So you can come to Ben if it makes sense, if we see the money, if you can create for me a one-page model that really makes sense, and you show that you've really thought this thing through, and you've got a little bit of traction, it's pretty easy to do. You know, we want to say yes. We are motivated to do that.
You said two, that was one. FabNet program?
I'm sorry, the two programs,
Yeah.
right? So that's the lowest level, and I don't want to belittle it, right? That's the TAF program.
Yep.
And then there's the programs that I give out, which are the regular ones, and we give out between $100,000 and $1 million of convertible note.
And then there's something called the FabNet that actually helps folks build their MVP. They have a $5,000 grant.
Yeah,
puts
that's
on
a
pathway.
grant program. We don't do that many of them.
Got it.
Anyway,
It's helpful, thank you.
you're welcome.
So this is my first one. Great stuff. Did I take some?
No, you're good.
You didn't.
What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff.
Jeff Genzer. So I come from the corporate world. I ran IT global services divisions, and I just quit my job about a month and a half ago. I also opened a restaurant about a year and a half ago. So I'm in the process of creating a startup, which is a mix between the restaurant industry and technology. And it's kind of an online restaurant group. So I guess the two questions I have is since that's not a pure tech, I'm getting the idea that everything's tech here. Is that something you guys actually look into if there's a mix there? And also, what is the minimums that, I'm just throw a ballpark, I'm working on the business plan right now, somewhere around 500K. Where is the minimums that you guys look at?
We're not purely technologically focused, but if there's no widget, then what would we be investing in anyhow, right? So we don't do project investments. So,
What about this term tech-enabled? Because it sounds like you're building tech-enabled.
I don't even know what that term means. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saying that as a joke, right? I mean, like tech-enabled. I mean,
It is tech.
what isn't tech-enabled, right? I mean, we're here. We're tech-enabled. We came up on an elevator. That's tech-enabled. Sorry.
So
I
there is
just-
no storefront.
Say again?
There is no storefront. It's two companies doing it, not two.
I can tell you what we don't invest in, and that we don't invest in consulting businesses. So in other words, there needs to be an annuity. That's the term that I like to think of it as, because you cannot scale. Believe me, I lived it for 17 years, right? I didn't make any money while I was sleeping, right? So unless you can generate annuities, we're just not interested in that. But then that means that you have to innovate in some way to build annuities. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah.
You come see me
I have to
afterwards.
go a little deeper into what it is.
How about I'll see you after.
Absolutely.
Hi, I work at Speeding Action, web development company, and a student of master's program in Berlin, Germany, study business intelligence.
Freshly in the U.S., just got here a couple days ago.
Yeah.
From Berlin.
Yeah. So my question is, what are the personal qualities that attract you in people and make you like them, make you appreciate them, and want to invest in them?
Ooh, soft skills. What are those?
Yes, this is a good question.
That's a good question.
So let's just talk about a generality, and then I'll use me as an example. I think that people are attracted to people who are like them. I just really believe that we group sort of naturally. So I don't mean just on the superficial way. I just mean that we group well as human beings, and so that's the lens by which I'm going to give you this example. So I covet truth, and so I am the kind of person that it's crazy. People tell me all kinds of very deep things very quickly, and that makes me feel honored, quite frankly. So one of the qualities that I look for in entrepreneurs is when it's very obvious that they're being authentic, that they're really telling me the gospel, they're really explaining it, and they're not holding anything back, because I'll find out the warts. But if I have to find them out because you didn't tell me, then that hurts you a lot more than if you just tell me. And so this is true in my personal life as well as my professional life. So I use that lens all the time in my life. I have no patience. There's not enough time for me to listen to BS. I just don't care. I don't want to talk about the weather. I want to talk about this great article that you read that really pissed you off. You follow what I'm saying? Something, or that I really loved and it was really nerdy, but I don't care. You know, I marched in the marching band, okay? I marched in the marching band. It's all right, right? I was one of those guys. Judge me, I don't care, but the people that I get along with are like, oh, that's interesting, that's cool, right? I would have never done it, but that's interesting, right? I'm not ashamed of it. There's so many people in this world, I call them the 95%ers. When I talk to my kids about it, it's the 5%ers. The 5%ers, the people that are out there, they're being themselves, they're being authentic, they're telling the truth, they're answering the questions the way you want. That's where the bonds come in.
So it's more than just integrity. It's a level of transparency. And
Yeah,
being
integrity
authentic.
is just superficial,
Let's give
right?
it.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about really sort of explaining it. Take that risk. What's the worst that happen? They think you're an idiot? Well, that's okay, but maybe you are, right? I mean, the point is like, I'm just not afraid of who I am. And don't be afraid of who you are. And I really think that your interactions will be better. I really believe it.
Ryan.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Ryan. We work with Benjamin Celeste in rolling out our growth services where we help busy entrepreneurs close the execution gap by giving them access to highly scaled and engaged online talent pool.
Great.
And I'm very interested to know about your idea on the concept of social entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
So doing business while doing good at the same time. Do you think they fit on one model?
So we are in a revolution, right? I mean, there's a revolution going on there. People are so much more aware of this social giving back thing. I think it's wonderful. It's been a part of my life for 35 years, right? I'm not saying I'm a pioneer. That sounds boastful. I don't mean it that way. I just mean that it's so great to see people.
It's hot.
Yeah, people giving a crap. It's so wonderful. And so I think they are 100% compatible. 100% compatible to be able to do something that has a way of giving back. You know, the phrase, how many am I up to right now, right? A rising tide raises all boats. So yeah, take that coffee with somebody and maybe help them out. That's gonna maybe rise the tide, it might help you. But don't do it for that reason. Do it because you think it's the right thing to do. Like if I'm gonna do anything with my life, I took a job at Ben Franklin Technology Partners. I cannot possibly get wealthy.
Side deals? They don't
It's
have that?
not possible for me to get wealthy. I took the job. I love it every single day, right? Every single day. I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm just simply saying that if you believe in that, right, the money will follow. Your happiness will follow. And then that's not a fairy tale. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's a lot to be said for waking up every day and being stoked that I'm awake and I'm alive and I'm doing good things. And yeah, so maybe you don't make the internet as rich as Mark Zuckerberg, right? So what?
We get Arnaud, is that good?
Anand. Like in your experience, do you have any specific advice for a startup that has a hardware component kind of associated with it?
Run away really fast. No.
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
I think that there is no better annuity business than something that's physical. It's really, really hard to do it and to do it well. But if you do it well, it's a pretty fantastic thing. So, yeah, I mean, do I have any advice? I personally have not built a business around something that's physical, but I can tell you that as a management consultant, I've helped some people do some pretty amazing things that scale wonderfully if you can figure that out. And because the world is shrinking in the IT space, it's also shrinking in the hardware space. So you can get something, you know, fabricated anywhere in the world and shipped back to you and stuff. So I don't know that that really answers your question, but I'm happy to talk to you about it offline. How's that?
Sure, thanks.
We'll take one more question. We'll take it from Princeton, New Jersey. Here.
Sure.
David, kick it off. And then you're going to be thinking about your closing statements as I close up and wrap up some of the sponsorship.
So, I'm David. I work actually at a Ben Franklin portfolio company. And my question is, in your arc with Ben Franklin, what are the biggest changes that you expect to see hitting the venture world in the next few years?
Biggest changes in the venture world,
Yeah,
not in the seed world, but in the venture world.
In approaching venture capital and how the path for the entrepreneur is changing, right?
Like, are you asking about a correction potentially?
Yeah, or just, so it's not the same as it was 10 years ago, and it won't be the same in 10
Yeah,
years.
what's
and
ahead of us?
Where are things going that are different than they've been in the past?
One of the, I can only answer that with sort of a question that I've been grappling with, which is, what happens when connectivity is free? What happens when the mobile phone is a ubiquitous thing? It's like a given. So that wave is past us. What's on the other side of that? I cannot figure that out yet. But I think if I were an entrepreneur, that's exactly what I'd be thinking, because the right now is done. You know, a social web thing, something that's mobile this or mobile that, that feels to me already tired. I'm not saying I'm not investing in that, I absolutely am. But that's not going to sustain us for 5 more years. I mean, I often think about my grandmother, who's since passed, obviously, but she was born at the turn of the century. So she was born in a time when there was barely automobiles, and she died when people had internet. Think about that, right? So this thing we carry around in our pockets all day long is more powerful than a computer was, what, just a short while ago. So what does that mean for a decade from now? And I'm not smart enough to figure that out, but I'm looking forward to being surprised, because the great thing about my dashboard is every day somebody comes into my office, and at least once a day they say, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, adding this to this, and I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome, what a great idea.
What a job. I know my grandma, and I'm sure your grandma would love to see Uber on the market and on demand, driving around.
Right. So I love passion. I think that people that are passionate about what they do are infectious. So if you've got one thing you want to take forward that we haven't spoken about today, because that's what I was thinking about, what, instead of repeating what I said, what about something new? So be passionate, love what you do, and if you're not passionate about what you're doing, just stop doing it. It's just not worth it. Life's too short. Just life's too short.
Let's hear it for Rick.